This is the Ring of Honor, a.k.a. Shane T, boy, the baddest champion you ever seen, boy.
This is Mr. Anderson.
This is good old JR Jim Ross, and you are listening.
You're listening to Knockouts and 3 Counts.
Cover! We got us a new world champion!
That might be one of the craziest knockouts I've ever seen in my life.
Knockouts and 3 Counts is the podcast, baby! There's a real deal, baby!
Knockouts and 3 Counts starts now.
Ooh, what up? No, this is another Tuesday. This is Knockouts and 3 Counts, and CERO MIEDO in this bitch. Shout out to Pentagon. We're going to talk about his debut. We're going to talk about there is a reason why this show is titled CERO MIEDO Inside the Ring and the Cage, because we got to talk about some of the people who have got some things going on that some pretty ballsy moves in the world of combat sports as well. Cory, how the fuck are you on a Tuesday?
Oh man, not too bad, not too bad. Getting that itch for spring to hurry the fuck up. Other than that though, man, not too bad, not too bad.
Well, dude, we did the first watch along we did in a while this past weekend. Everybody that checked it out, whether that be on YouTube, Facebook, or Millions, come by, talk your shit. Ain't nobody scared over here. We ain't doesn't threaten me with a good time. We watched past guests of the show, Austin Bashi, make his debut at UFC Vegas 101. We also saw Mackenzie Dern pick up a dub. It was cool to get to do the watch along. Seems like a lot of people enjoyed hearing our live thoughts on the fights. So I guess that's as good a place as any to start. I mean, what were your thoughts on doing the watch along, Cory? And we'll start with what were your thoughts on the performance of past guests of the show, Austin Bashi?
Well, to begin first, to at least be able to begin on a bright note, I thought the watch along did great. I thought it was entertaining enough. I mean, I haven't done a watch back or anything, but you know, during the time, it didn't feel like we were, you know, too much dead air or anything. You know, of course, there's only so much you can comment on. You can't really talk on the commercials or something like that. But I felt like we did a pretty decent job of keeping it so there wasn't much dead air. We, you know, had some pretty good conversations about the fights themselves. I think there's definitely a little bit of room for improvement, of course, but I think for a first go around, I think it did pretty good. I definitely think there's potential for some maybe up and coming events.
But what about, like I was saying, what were your thoughts on the debut of our guy, Austin Bashi?
Man, almost forgot. So I want to start, I guess, with what Bisping and Paul Felder said on the Believe You Me podcast. Really, it was Christian Rodriguez's performance more so than it was the lack thereof of Austin's or anything like that, in my opinion.
I agree.
I feel like Christian really he did great out there. I was even talking about it on the watch alongs. I said how tough of a fight this was. I know Austin was a huge favorite. I had mentioned that on the show that, like, you know, making your debut, yes, he's highly touted, this, that, and the other, but that's a huge line. And I wouldn't be surprised. Christian's a huge, you know, tough opponent. And ultimately, that's what we ended up seeing. I feel like Austin had his moments in the fights. He won one round. But
on all the judges' scorecards, which for those that don't understand why we're saying that's significant, usually when somebody just gets destroyed and it's like a 30-27 and somebody just gets beat up for 3 rounds. So for all 3 of the judges to think that he had won one of those rounds, that shows that he was in the fight. Not to say that I didn't think Christian Rodriguez won the fight. I'm just saying it's not as though Austin didn't have his moments either.
Yeah, and realistically that all that tells me is that first round or that third round, if he would have been able to do just 1 or 2 things different and been successful in those implementations, he could have definitely, I don't want to say sneaked out another round or something like that, because he didn't sneak out the second one. I feel like that one was fairly clear.
I agree.
So, but he could have snuck out another one with just a couple harder shots thrown, just a little more ground control, a little, a couple submission attempts and stuff. I feel like what we didn't see in his game was his ability to start the strikes to then lead to the wrestling. He was relying a little bit too much on his shots, which were looking really good. I feel like against an opponent that isn't of the level of a Christian Rodriguez, you were probably getting those takedowns. But because he kind of reached so high right away, which we were talking about on the show. I mean, I was naming, former top 15 guys and stuff that, were potential opponents for him and stuff, because not only us, but Vegas and, a lot of people felt
I
that
wanted
way.
to bring up is that go ahead.
Real quick, just to round out my point, I feel like Austin, it's not the end of the world. If you happen to see this, brother, it's really not the end of the world. It's your opening fight. We've seen a ton of people, like I had mentioned on the show, Diego Lopez lost his, opening fight. It's not the end of the world. Now look at him. He's 5 fights in and he's already 1 fight away from the title. So I not that he's necessarily going to have to go on that type of, run or something like that, but he's young. He's still just now reaching the heights of the game. He's got to realistically, like I had mentioned, Kyle, like me and you, is he's got to learn to implement his striking a little more to lead to the wrestling. I mean, we talk about it all the time, that chain movement of keep them guessing, do the Marab, throw hands in their face and then take them down. And then if they get back up, throw some more hands and then take them down and then chase subs. And we just weren't seeing that. We were seeing too much reliance on the wrestling game, and ultimately, I think that's what cost him last Saturday.
Okay. So I agree with a lot of what you said in that I think he's definitely got to implement his striking more. But there's a few things I want to address. I seen it said that, in quote, you don't know anything about UFC if you thought that Austin Bashi was going to win that fight. Okay. First of all, I got a few problems with that. Number one, clearly we weren't the only ones that thought that there was a good chance that he could win, being the fact that, as you said, Vegas had him as the betting favorite. Number one, that's first of all. Yeah. So if Vegas doesn't know fights, I don't know who does.
I wonder, not to interrupt you real quick, but to preference it, Kyle, I wonder if he meant the fact of after, because there was a couple comments saying like after the fact that they thought that he won and stuff like that. And I don't think
it said, and I quote, if you thought that Austin Bashi was going to win that fight, you don't know shit about UFC. I watch this religiously.
Well, I'm just saying maybe it was meant as after when the decision was being read.
If you're talking about just the decision, maybe. But all I'm saying is that guy had as much chance to win that fight as anybody that steps into a UFC thing. And clearly, my point is Vegas thought that he was the favorite in that fight as well. So my point is if Vegas is saying you're the favorite for a fight, they thought that he deserved to be there too. And that brings me to my second point. I agree with you completely in that I think he's just got to mix up his striking more, which is another thing I was talking about. He's trained with Métis since he was a little kid, who's one of the best Muay Thai practitioners, period. Mm-hmm. And so I know he's got the striking, but, you being with me, commentating on a lot of these fights, he hasn't had to use his striking because his wrestling and submissions and cardio have overwhelmed everybody he's fought so far. And because of that, that's another thing I like about this situation for him is, yes, he lost his UFC debut. He is also 13-1. So for that to be your first loss, and to your point, Christian Rodriguez is no slouch. I knew going into this fight that this was going to be a tough matchup. I knew that it was going to be scrappy. And again, another reason why I think that it shows the level that he's at to be able to hang with somebody like that. Mm-hmm. So in my opinion, if you give him, 6 months or whatever, however long he wants before he fights again, he gets a full camp, I think you're going to see an even better, version of him. I take nothing away from Christian Rodriguez. I think Christian Rodriguez is a dog. I think he showed that because of the way he was able to weather the constant attacks with the wrestling and to be able to still use it defensively and then turn it into offense for himself. So there's that. And like I said, all in all, like you said, I mean, he's not the first. He won't be the last that loses his UFC debut. And again, a guy like that, and knowing the team that he comes from, like I do, I just think you give him a fair amount of time for a camp. And I think a lot of those things will be things that'll be worked on in the next fight, in my opinion. Go ahead.
Like Felder and Bisping were saying, man, that's just not. I'm sure either his management or the UFC brass or whatever the case had a hand in why it was such a tough opponent right away, of course. But that being said, he didn't draw. He drew a pretty short stick. That was a tough match, no matter which way you looked at it. Especially when you looked at the way that Austin's been able to find his victories. And then you look at what Christian's been good at. You look at the performance he was able to do against Ruiz Jr.
Rosas.
Yeah, Rosas. I couldn't think of it. But when you look at the performance against him and then you look at what happened ultimately this last Saturday, I think it was really kind of reminiscent of the same thing. Somebody that wasn't able to round their skills out in the match. And that's what we seen with Austin, unfortunately, in my opinion.
Like I say, man, I think all in all, I think it's going to be a good learning experience from him, and we're going to have to see what happens in his next fight. I mean, there were some nasty ass knockouts on
That's for sure.
On this card as well. Abdul Razak Al Hassan, man, I did not see that one coming. That was it's like the classic picture that you see in the gym when both guys throw a left hook at the same time, and it's just like one got there first, but you just seen his lights just shut off, and that was just holy shit. That's one of those that you can't really react any other way because you just seen his it's gnarly. It doesn't matter how many times you see it, but when you see somebody get caught and it just shuts them off like that. Damn.
Well, when we were talking about it live, when we were doing our watch along, we were both saying that you can't really fight a kickboxer as wild as he has been and think that you're going to get away with it. And essentially that's what happened. He landed a really good shot and had Almeida on wobbly legs, and then Almeida countered him while Hassan was being too powerful with the hooks and just was winging them and got caught himself, man. It was the classic, you thought you hurt me, well, call the ambulance for yourself.
Sometimes the most hurt guy can be the most dangerous. That's the thing. Just because you hurt somebody.
Especially a kickboxer with his level of, decree and striking and stuff, that's not somebody that you can just go in there winging against no matter how hurt they are,
Yeah, dude. Like I said, that was a nasty ass knockout. We saw another, you and I talked about this before we went live on the watch along, and shout out to anybody that's watching. If you guys watched UFC Fight Night Vegas 101, let me know what you think in the comments. But we saw a return to form of sorts for Mackenzie Dern. Getting an armbar finish like that on Amanda Ribas, and getting herself some redemption with the fact that she was able to get the dub on Ribas, given how the first fight went. I mean, good performance for Dern, but like I said, her getting that win in between that kind of is why I always talk about momentum. And so I don't know what's next for Amanda Hebos after that one, though?
It's a weird spot. I've seen a lot of people calling for the rubber match. I don't disagree necessarily. I think
I heard that too, and I wouldn't be mad at that.
I think that's something that they could look at in a year or so, though. I don't think that's something that you run. You don't have a main event, have it, even if it is the second meeting and the first one was the other way around. Even I feel like you can't run it right back unless it's for a title or
and
something
Mackenzie's
like that.
going to want to move up.
Yeah. I feel like ultimately, yes, it hurts Hebos. We were talking about it on our watch along that was a big spot for her, for both of them being 2 out of their last 3 were losses. This was kind of like a not make or break, because I don't feel like either woman's at that point in their career yet, but it's definitely a continuation towards your ascension, or you're going to be in the lower ends of the top 10 now. And essentially, we've seen Mackenzie Dern go out there, look really good in the first round, and then find the submission in this early part of the second. So realistically, I don't know what you do with Mackenzie Dern, because she's one of those girls that can beat anybody and can lose to everybody. It's like the weirdest combination. Like, she can literally go out there and put on these dominant performances, and I think she could do it against just about everybody in the division. I think her kryptonite would be maybe like a Tatiana Suarez, somebody with some really powerful wrestling and just can overpower her. But that being said, I mean, realistically, Mackenzie's in a weird spot, because you could match her up against Wei Lee. You could see how that fight plays out, and if
I don't
Mackenzie's
think
got
she's
enough
getting a
heart to
title
deal
shot
with it.
off that, but I could definitely see her getting something
But
in the top 5.
when you look at who else is in that division and who has already fought for the belt, though, your options, literally on the Ariel Helwani show, he was basically saying, if you want to have Wei Lee fight anytime soon, you got to either basically do Mackenzie or Jandiroba. And ultimately, I think Jandiroba probably deserves it a little more. She's on more of a win streak. She's looked more dominant in her last couple fights, but I think we've seen that the way that the UFC deals their cards a lot, and they deal towards what the fans would rather see a lot of times, and I feel like that's a Mackenzie Dern fight. So, if you put, like I say, the division, pretty much everybody else in that like top 6 has already fought for the belt and lost. So it's a weird spot.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I just feel like she's gonna have to get another one, but before she does.
Agree.
But I mean, at the same time, I mean, I guess, circumstances being what they are at times, I guess it is what it is.
They were talking, not to round it out real quick. They were also talking on that show about, do you run back the Jandiroba versus Dern fight, because Mackenzie Dern already has a victory.
Fair.
Mackenzie already beat her though when Jandiroba was still early in her,
Okay,
UFC
but
run.
you just said yourself that Jandiroba's on a bigger win streak than Mackenzie is at this point. I mean, that's only win number 2 for Mackenzie.
Both of them kind of seem like they should, have at least one more. So it's just a weird spot for the division. That's all I was trying to like round that point out with. But go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, but that's my whole point. Like, I mean, they both kind of seem like they need one. You already said yourself, all the rest of the people have pretty much already fought for the title. So, I mean, look, you got a beef. Get in the cage, and then whoever wins really deserves, the belt.
Yeah.
I just feel like
shot.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's the only way you could really do it, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, maybe that's not what Wei Lee wants to hear. If she has like a certain timetable that she's looking to fight on, like I can understand.
She's scheduled with Suarez right now, so that really we'll see.
So
how
she's
that
already got a fight
out.
then.
Yeah.
So right now she don't give a shit. So since they already have it like that, then
I imagine that's a matchup. Yeah.
Well, then that's all the more reason to do the Dern versus Jandiroba fight. Then that's all the more reason to do that. Like, that makes perfect sense to why you would want to do that. Like, and so, like I said, I mean, I feel like it kind of, this card kind of took us to where it left you with only like a few ways out on that fight, and then the other fight that I was eluding me to spit out was the big knockout for Ponzinibbio, man. Like, I've always been a fan of that guy. You know, he's been in and out, and you know, for him to get a knockout like the way he did, you know, that was
That was a
pretty
powerful
fucking
shot.
nasty, dog.
It was definitely a big shot that he landed to finish off the fight. That being said, Ponzinibbio is one of them guys where he just kind of, like you say, Kyle, just sneakily stays around. Seems like every time that they give him one of these guys that maybe they're thinking will be somebody, he beats them. Every time they move him up a little bit, he loses. So Ponzinibbio is in a weird spot.
Hey, I respect the call out he had after that, and I'm totally okay with that being the next fight.
I do
He
not
said he
remember off
wants
the
to
top of
fight
my head.
Luque.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that would be a
I'm
perfect
totally
one.
okay with
Yeah.
it. Fucking run
Perfect
that fight.
fight.
I
Both
feel like
guys.
that's going to be a fireworks fight. Somebody's probably going to get knocked out, and then it will also create another guy that you can move back up into the rankings because Luque kind of fell down for a little bit. Then he had a nasty ass performance in his last fight. You got Ponzinibbio coming off the knockout, and I respect the balls on the call out. It ain't a guy who's coming off of 2-3 losses and all that. Man, I respect that.
Both guys are at the same point too, pretty much in their career, where it's like it's not make or break, but it's like you guys have both made a real climb towards the upper, side of the division. I know Luque dealt with his injuries. I know Ponzinibbio was out for like 2-3 years with I think it was like a bad staph infection or something like that. So that being said, I mean, both guys kind of had their primes, I feel like, and could make some last moves towards a potential title run. But yeah, let's run it. See who can continue that climb up the ladder.
You want to get to the belt, you gotta beat the killers to get to the belt. And I respect the call out. I think it's a perfect matchup for both guys. I'm with it. Speaking of what else is going on this weekend, I know the title says CERO MIEDO. I didn't forget it. We got to talk about Pentagon's debut and all that stuff. We've also got UFC 311 going down this weekend, which I am really looking forward to seeing what happens with this fight because I feel like a lot of people's trajectories are really going to change after this weekend. Kevin Holland calling out the former one championship champion and Henry I always have such a hard time saying it. Henry the Ritter.
RDR.
Yeah, RDR has already shown that he can win in the UFC, even if it wasn't the most like stylish of ways to win. I don't care. He came in and got a dub like that first fight in the UFC. Say what you want. He beats Kevin Holland, especially if he can beat Kevin Holland in some form of a submission. That's going to be a nasty win too. But again, that's why I kind of feel like this card is like the card of like one guy goes up and one guy goes down, because if Kevin Holland loses this fight, I kind of feel like this is going to be like one of his last chances to get like one of them guys that's like on the way up to the title. And if he loses this fight, then it's going to be kind of one of those things where they just have him fight the fun fights, which not that I think he really would give a shit, but that's kind of what this matchup like seems like to me. And if you look up and down the whole card, it's kind of like that, where it's like, you got two guys that with like another win, maybe 2 wins, you're right back in the thick of things, but for the other guy, if they lose, like, I don't, like I said, not like they're going to be out of the UFC necessarily, but like, I think like your upward trajectory towards being like the main event pay-per-view guy, I think might go south.
Yeah, it's a weird spot. I think more so for Kevin Holland. Not
I do
weird.
too.
I don't think weird's necessarily the right word.
I think all the
but
pressure's on Kevin Holland, to be honest.
it is. Not necessarily though, because DeRitter
Not
talks
all
a
of
big,
it, because DeRitter
yeah,
still
big.
has to impress
He
Dana,
talks a big
because
game.
Dana's
He moved into a new organization. He's trying to prove that being a champion in one FC, it doesn't mean that, nothing. It means that he's trying to prove what he thinks, that he's a top level, no matter what organization, athlete at his weight class. And that being said, I think Kevin Holland is a great fight to prove whether he is or isn't. I think Kevin Holland, we've seen struggle with the wrestling, which is one of the things that RDR does really well. But we've also seen the fact that Kevin Holland does pose a submission threat, both offensively and off his back. So that being said, I think it's not some fight where RDR can just take him down, immediately find a submission on somebody who's a fish out of water.
I don't think that's the game Kevin Holland needs to try to play, though. If I'm Kevin Holland, I want to throw hands with this guy.
Oh, for sure. I agree. That's what the strategy should
I'm just
be.
saying, I don't think getting in a grappling battle with this guy is the way to go.
No, that's not at all what I'm saying. I think RDR is going to have the ability to take him down, though, is what I'm saying. I think RDR's wrestling ability, in at least in what we were able to see in one championship, which, not all those guys are top level wrestlers over there in Asia.
But our guy Jared Brooks is. We're going to talk to him again soon.
But that being said, we've seen that was the most dominant route to success for him, was being able to take people down, chase submissions, chase ground and pound, and just kind of be that wet blanket on top that can just land damage and some subs. And yet, like I was saying, I don't think Kevin Holland's the guy that will just allow. He'll allow a takedown and possibly allow himself to be, in the bottom mount position. But that being said, I still think he'll be able to chase subs and be dangerous enough. And I'm hoping it just becomes an entertaining fight. I think Kevin Holland will be able to do enough to get it done, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if RDR walks away.
I want Kevin Holland to win this. I think Henry DeRitter is going to win this fight.
Yeah.
I want Kevin Holland to win this fight for all the reasons that you just said. He's very entertaining. I enjoy watching his fights. Something tells me that DeRitter is going to make this fight ugly enough to where it's going to stifle Kevin Holland to do what he wants to do, and eventually DeRitter might be able to catch him in something. Again, we're not going to deep dive into each one, but if you look at, honest to God, if you look at every one of these fights, see, now this is one of those where sometimes I say MMA does pro wrestling better than pro wrestling does. Because seriously, if you look at up and down the whole main card, it's like one guy, goes up. It's like the heel baby face thing, but one guy's on their way up and one guy's on their way down. In this next fight, it's another example of that. You got Beneil Dariush versus Renato Moicano, which banger fight, first of all. I think it's going to be a very good fight. I think it's going to be a very entertaining fight. I think Beneil Dariush, for the hardcores that know what time it is, know that he's been good for years, but I don't think he's really ever gotten the spotlight that he should, because he's not the biggest trash talker and all that kind of stuff. So this fight, I feel like, is his chance to be able to go back in there, and if he can get a finish over a guy like Moicano with all the heat that Moicano's got on, that puts Beneil back where he's supposed to. For Moicano, I feel like if Moicano can get a win over a guy like Dariush, now that's going to move him into like a different echelon of the division. As far as what I think's going to happen, I like Moicano a lot, but I still think that Benny's going to get it done.
I like that.
I don't know how. I don't have a method of victory. I don't know if it's going to be a finish. I don't know if he's going to win by decision. But I wouldn't be shocked if he got a finish in this one, because Moicano is very much an aggressive guy. I also feel like Beneil Dariush is going in there with like something to prove. Like he wants to go in, like, or at least I would think that would be what the mindset would be. I'm not saying he's going to finish Moicano, but I could see it happening just because of the style fighter that Moicano is. But something tells me Dariush is going to win, but you also know how I am about momentum. So I wouldn't be shocked. But I don't know. Something in my gut tells me that Dariush is going to get it done.
Dariush has got so much riding on this fight. I mean, like you say, Kyle, he was somebody just like 2 years ago we were talking about was the rightful guy to be contending for the belt, was that guy to challenge for it next. And it's a travesty. He's getting skipped over for these other guys. And, oh, they're going to run Volk, again, they're going to do this. And it should be. And then he lost, right? I mean, it happens to the best of them, right? Lost to Charles Oliveira. You can't really hang your head too much on that. Shit happens, It was for a title eliminator, is what it is. Then he comes back and loses again. And that's where things got kind of rough, Now he's taken, if I'm not mistaken, like a year off since the last fight. Obviously enough time to let the cobwebs kind of reset from getting knocked out in his last one and stuff. But it's such a weird spot to be in, from being literally that guy.
Well, I would also imagine, just to play devil's advocate too, though, part of it with Dariush, I would imagine, is like the same thing that you hear Angela Hill talk about. Like them guys like them that have been in the UFC for a real long time, especially a guy like him that's like as highly ranked as he is. I'd also imagine, while yes, I'm sure he had a suspension from getting knocked out, but I would imagine part of why it takes so long to get him a fight is, number one, he's not going to just end up fighting some Joe Blow nobody, and number two, being in the UFC that long, getting Beneil Dariush in the cage probably it costs a pretty fucking penny.
Oh, I'm sure of that, but it was stated that he had been offered matches and was turning them down to allow.
No, and I respect that.
Time.
I'm not saying that wasn't what it is. I'm just saying I'm sure there were multiple factors.
Oh, I'm sure there's a million instances. I'm just saying on this particular one, I remember him doing the submission radio show like 6 months ago or something, and was saying that he's going to be out for a while because he still wants to, he wants to come back at 100% and ready, well trained and stuff. That being said, I also seen, I think it was just a random Twitter post. I watched too much MMA content. I can't remember exactly where it was from. But somebody was breaking down this fight, and they were talking about the fact of where is Moicano better than Beneil Dariush, and there really wasn't, in this person's mind, there really wasn't a single aspect. But yet, like you say, Kyle, the momentum and stuff like that, it's really hard to think that even with the skill factor being what it is with the two athletes, it's hard to say that you're going to put your cards on Beneil with the coming off 2 losses, with a time layoff, with the fact that he's older of the two. There's a lot of factors that go against him in this fight, but like I was saying, I think his skills in every single aspect of the game are better. He's a better striker. He's a better
100%.
Wrestler. He's a better grappler. And Moicano's method to victory in 99% of his fights is his ability to get people down and either find a submission or ground and pound them to death. Look what he did to Dover. Look what he runs through these guys in the first round and just piles on them. That being said, I have a feeling Moicano's getting his hand raised Saturday, and I'm a fan of Beneil Dariush, so I hate to say it, but I have a feeling Moicano. We're seeing more money Moicano.
All right. Well, all right. Next fight we got on the docket. I want Jamal to win this fight so bad, dude. I really do. I want, according to this, he's the betting favorite, but it's about a pick 'em. It's Jamal Hill versus Yuri Prochazka. I hope, again, call it bias, whatever. He's past guest of the show, also a Michigan guy. You know, I want him to go in there and get this knockout. I'd love to see him go in and go back and show true to form to the Jamal Hill that we were all seeing on the way come up and really be able to silence a lot of the haters, which I think a knockout against a guy like Yuri would do that, because that would put him right back where he was as far as the positioning in the light heavyweight division.
Yep.
That said, a lot of the things that he's posted on social media and stuff like that, and like, you know, fans getting at him and stuff like that. My biggest thing is I just hope that it doesn't affect the way he fights.
Yeah.
Like, if he goes into it clear-headed, I think he could completely knock the fuck out of Yuri Prochazka. If he goes in there and he's not 100% focused on it, that can be a problem. But I'll let you pick first. Like I say, we still got a few more topics to go through, so we're not going to completely deep dive it. But
Yeah, I'll try to keep them shorter and sweeter. But this one is obviously going to be a little more in depth. That being said, I feel like Jamal Hill should win this fight, but if he slips up his mentality, his defense, even for 1 second, we've seen what Yuri's been able to do to, like, Dominic Reyes when he hit him with that crazy spinning back elbow. He's just insanely creative. He's equally as long, if not longer, with his reach and range and the way he throws his shots. He really extends them out there, where Jamal kind of is more in his base and really power, you know, like clean boxing, kickboxing style, just power, lays it on you with pressure and stuff. And it's a tough fight, man. I feel like clean usually beats, sloppy. I don't mean to call him sloppy, but Yuri's style is not, particularly orthodox or anything like that. And that being said, I feel like Jamal Hill's really got to be on his P's and Q's, man. If he looks away for a second, if he does the whole what happened with Pereira thing, got kicked in the nuts, waves it off, it takes one shot with Yuri. We've seen it multiple times now. The dude's super creative. I have a feeling Jamal's going to institute a different fight style than what we're used to seeing, just a little bit. I think he's going to maybe apply a little bit of cage pressure and stuff in this fight, and maybe try to land some good power shots against the cage, just to eliminate a bit of that range anxiety that you end up with. But that being said, man, I, like you say, Kyle, I'm rooting for the mitten man himself, Jamal Hill. He's not making himself a ton of favor fans with he's not making himself a ton of fans with all the shit that he's posting online and going back and forth, and just, it seems like he won't let go of that Poatan fight. It's one thing to chase a rematch. It's another thing to be kind of going back on the old fight still. That's what it seems like the general fan concise is, that he's just complaining about it too much. That being said, I think Jamal gets it done. I think he silences a lot of haters come Saturday, but man, he better watch out.
I think he gets the job done too. But like you said, we need to see Jamal on his P's and Q's. I think he's going to be. But yeah, definitely not a fight that he can fuck around, because if he does, he's going to find out. All right, now the last two are going to be our title fights. Again, not that Nurmagomedov is on like a losing streak of any kind, but I feel like with all the talking that's been done, and that should have had a title shot and all these kind of things, I feel like if he doesn't beat Merab here and doesn't do all the things he's been saying he's going to do, I think it does a lot more damage than it does to Merab if Merab loses.
Okay.
And
I feel the opposite.
I think Merab gets the job done on this fight.
I also feel the opposite. Talk me through it, Kyle. I've been talking first. Let me hear yours.
I think Merab gets the job done because, again, I always talk about momentum. I mean, he's been saying for how long that he was the guy, that he was the one that was going to take out Sean O'Malley, that he was going to be the one that did all this stuff. And I mean, realistically, whether it was the most entertaining of fights or not, he went in there and did what he said he was going to do, and Sean O'Malley couldn't do nothing to stop it. He can say he wants to run it back as much as you want, and I'm not saying that I don't want to see that, because I do. But that said, to me, man, I just think that the momentum that he's on, the role that he's on, and I also feel like he still feels, it just seems like he still feels like he's slighted by the UFC too. So I also feel like he's still kind of fighting with that chip on his shoulder too. In the sense of like wanting to like prove where he's at as champion in the UFC. So, and the reason I feel like I said, that I think Umar kind of is in a spot where if he doesn't get this win, like it could like move him down, not necessarily move him down out of the top 5, but I feel like he's really been talking about why he feels like he's in the top 2 and that he should have been there instead of Merab. And so for me, I feel like if he doesn't beat Merab, especially now that Merab's got the belt, I feel like he's going to have to win a couple fights for him to be able to get back up there. Where Merab, I feel like if he loses to him, it's almost like, okay, well, you lost to the young up and coming killer that, was a freight train, because then it just depends on how that would age. But I think Merab gets the job done. But for me, I feel like Umar's got more to lose.
I feel the utter and complete opposite on just about everything you said, Kyle. I agree with the points that you made, and that there is some facts to them. But the fact that they're rushing the champ to defend this quick on the challenger's timeline tells me that if he loses this fight, he ain't sniffing another title bout for a while. He's going to have to fight for a while. He's going to have to climb again, just like he did last time. He's going to have to be basically that guy that you can't say doesn't deserve it to be able to fight for it again. Fair or not, I think that's just what.
Well, let's also not forget, part of the reason he didn't get a title shot long before he did was because his boy was the champ.
I completely agree. I'm not disagreeing with that fact, but they're definitely not doing him a favor by rushing him to fight possibly his toughest matchup in the division.
I agree with that.
That I feel like that's a thing. B, he's literally co-maining under his cousin, or whatever their actual relation is, blood, brother, whatever. They're all brothers, right? But that being said, he's literally co-maining, so clearly they've gone as deep as they could in this fight camp. He's training with Islam as much as it seems like this card is being dished out as come watch Islam and come watch Nurmagomedov walk away with belts. That's how I'm viewing it. I feel like for Merab, if he doesn't get this victory, you're shoved down the line. You're just that guy again that you got to go win a bunch. We'll see you when we see you, kind of thing. For Usman, I feel like Umar. Sorry, Usman's fighting this weekend as well. He's fighting for the now PFL tour, whatever the fuck they're calling it nowadays. That being said, Umar is that young up and comer hotness, like you said, Kyle. If he was to slip on a banana peel, which I don't think that would be what it is, but if he falls in this fight and doesn't happen to get it done, I think literally he wins one or two more, and they're like, look, he's Nurmagomedov, so he should be our champ. And that's just seems to be the way they keep feeding it. That being said, I feel like it's the toughest matchup for Merab. I feel like I was saying with the last fight, what single aspect of the game, other than maybe the just raw determination, is Merab better at? He's not a better grappler. He's not a better striker. He's not a better submission artist. He typically, when he does get people down there, even like not great wrestlers are able to get up. That's why he gets 38 takedowns in a fight. I don't think he's going to be able to do that against Nurmagomedov. So I just feel like it's Umar's belt come Saturday, in my opinion.
We will see. And then the last fight, you got Islam versus Sarukian, which I do think that Sarukian will cause some interesting problems for Makhachev, especially in the earlier rounds. But I don't think Islam's losing this fucking belt, dude. I really don't. I think this guy is going to be a good challenger. I think it's going to be a decent fight. I don't think Islam's just going to blow through him.
Yeah.
But I don't think that Sarukian really is going to be able, like you just said with Nurmagomedov, all the things that he was good at in his last fight against Charles Oliveira, he ain't doing that to Islam Makhachev.
Yeah. I know. That's the thing. And even in that fight, he was kind of put in some hairy submission spots.
Damn right he was. I thought that some of those should have been scored a little bit heavier, in my personal opinion, because of how close they were. So, yeah, he was...
And that
he may have been able to do some wrestling, but to think that he's going to do that to a guy like Makhachev,
I think it might possibly. I mean, we've seen him beat Oliveira, so it's kind of hard to say his toughest matchup might be Oliveira, but it might be Islam's hardest matchup coming this weekend. I mean, we've seen what Sarukian was able to do in his UFC debut. That was another guy that lost his UFC debut and is now fighting for the belt again. Happens to be a rematch. So Austin, FYI. But that being said, we've seen what Sarukian was able to do in that first one. He really put on a above what everybody was expecting of him. He really outshined. He's since continued to outshine. He's, like you said, beat the likes of Charles Oliveira and stuff, but that was such a close fight. And I feel like with Islam, it just hasn't been close fights lately. We've seen Islam. He really is, in my opinion, turned into like the Khabib 2.0, except for the fact that he doesn't rely quite as much on the ground control. He just either gets submissions or lands incredible striking. He seems to just now... It's so weird to see a guy that dominant in the grappling aspect be that good at striking, and for him to outstrike my boy Dustin Poirier in that last fight, that really showed a lot to me. So I feel like I gotta go Islam in this one.
Yeah, I'm like I said, to me, I think it's going to be a good fight. I think he has like the skill set to make it a good fight. I just don't think he's got what it's overall going to take to take it over. Well, I said that you got to have CERO, MIEDO both in the cage and in the wrestling ring. Yesterday, we saw the debut of the man himself, CERO, MIEDO, in this joint. Pentagon, or as they're calling him in WWE, Penta, made his debut last night on Raw and Netflix. First of all, shout out to Chad Gable, who you can see me interview from last year's Royal Rumble. Dude, that match was so badass. I'm so glad they did right by him with the entrance. And there were some things that were a little bit clunky, I guess, in spots. But I think part of that is like getting used to the new ring. They're all new opponents. But you couldn't have had a better guy than Chad Gable to get in there. Like, I'd really love to see Chad Gable win some singles gold at some point. But I'm just so happy that what happened with Pentagon happened the way it did, because one of my biggest complaints with their time in AEW is, while we all love Pentagon and Phoenix as a tag team, like, if you watch Lucha Underground, they were both great as fucking singles. Like, Pentagon Jr. versus Vampiro is one of the most badass stories. And so I think getting to see a little bit of that by himself. And if Phoenix is going to come at some point to WWE, well, then now we already know what Penta is capable of doing. You know what I mean? And so I thought that was dope. I thought the promo after the match was dope. I love that he like not only spoke in Spanish, but like he said what he basically, you got the gist of what he was needing to say in English too. So like, and he had his family in the front row. So like, dude, it was dope. It was really dope to see that for him. Really interested to see like who they would have him feud with. Like, you know, you got Legado del Fantasma. You've obviously got Rey Mysterio still around, who he's already faced in Lucha Underground, which would be sweet to see that on like a WWE like stage.
The big stage.
Yeah, like that would be cool to see again. There's so many good ones, and like he's big enough that it's not like one of those things where it's like far-fetched to see him like immediately start fucking with the big people. So, like I say, all in all, I thought it was so dope to see Pentagon Jr.'s debut in WWE. It'll be interesting to see how that kind of like manifests itself, I guess, as we go a little farther into that. The other big thing that was up today was the tweets from Cory Graves. Now, anyone that's followed our show knows that we're big fans of the homie Sam Adonis, who is the younger brother of Cory Graves. Also El Rito de las Chicas in Mexico over there with AAA and all those things. But I've said it many times on this show. I love Cory Graves on commentary. There's a reason why he's been kicking ass for like 8 years. You know, I mean, yes, he was a wrestler beforehand. Unfortunately, got injured, told he couldn't wrestle anymore, and then transitioned into commentary. And in my opinion, has really kicked ass. But as it tends to always happen in WWE, and I mean, we've seen it with like when they moved JR and the King around, when you had Mick Foley come in, when you had, I mean, you could go over all kinds of names that have been in and out of the commentary booth over the years. But with that, you know, everything kind of got moved around. Like Joe Tessitore and Wade Barrett got moved to SmackDown. Michael Cole and Pat McAfee are on Netflix. You know, and you don't know whether that's like something where like Netflix said, okay, we like Cole and, you know, McAfee on commentary or whatever the case. But I mean, I know that it's been widely well received for Joe Tessitore as well. And I mean, me being a boxing guy and combat sports guy, and I mean, dude, he does football and all that stuff too. I've always been a Joe Tessitore fan. So I love the fact that he's getting received well. But Cory Graves put out a couple tweets talking about, you know, think about being, you know, told that you can't wrestle anymore and then finding a career adjacent thing and then being really good at it, talking about commentary, and then basically being told you're not famous enough to do just when you get to the part of seeing the fruits of your labor, you're told you're not famous enough for your job. Now, okay. He also had put out a tweet, tune in to NXT, that he has a lot to say. Well, obviously, before we got to NXT, that got pulled somehow. So, I mean, how deep that is, I don't know. I've still got to watch NXT, because there also has been rumor that, you know, he had been cleared to wrestle and stuff like that too. But I don't know. In some
that'd
ways,
be the perfect way to make a splash if you're gonna. Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? So I got to watch NXT and see what happens. But a few things. As far as, is it like a demotion? I don't know that going to NXT is a demotion, being that NXT is on a national network with it being CW. So a whole bunch of new eyes are getting to see it. You were on there with Booker T and Vic Joseph. But I do get I guess I do get it in a way in him saying, like, you know, he had been like the top guy for like the last however many years, and then, you know, they bring in Pat McAfee and Joe Tessitore, and so some people got moved around. To your point, that was something that kind of like went through my head too, was like, okay, I know that there's been rumor for years that, you know, or at least a while now, that he had gotten cleared to wrestle again, which, like you said, if that is the case, that would be, you know, dope to see too. But I don't know. He started in NXT, so I would think that it would be cool to go back there, but I guess I get it when you're going from the main roster to doing NXT, but I don't know. I guess I don't see it necessarily as a demotion, but I could also see why you would think that once you know, been on the main roster for so many years. So I don't know, man. I guess it's kind of one of those things we're gonna have to wait and see. Like, you know, does it turn into something else? Do we see any more of it? Because I don't think Corey Graves is going anywhere because of this. Even if they didn't like what he said, I don't think that I don't see happening. Because like I said, I really do think that he's very talented. I hope that it's the latter, and that because he wrestled in NXT before he got hurt, that maybe, you know, that's where we're headed. Like, you know, he got hurt in NXT, he comes back to wrestle in NXT. You know, that would be cool, but I mean, who knows? I mean, because I'm not sure if that's where we're headed, but I don't know. What do you think? What do you think as far as the demotion thing? And
I mean,
what do you think?
if that is really how it boils out, and he's just now on it is kind of a demotion. I mean, that's because you go from being like, you can argue that, you know, network TV, this, that, the other, they're not making a big deal compared to they are about how, you know, SmackDown's on, you know, Netflix, and they're not making the biggest deal like they are the other way around. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I
So
mean, Raw being on Netflix is definitely a
Raw,
hot
sorry,
thing,
I
and
said
SmackDown
yeah,
being on USA and going to 3 hours is a big deal.
yeah.
But it's like, I mean, it's
It's
tough,
not.
right?
It's
So
when there's one
like,
that's considered the highest standard, and there's one that's considered your way on to the
so here
higher
was the
standard.
point I was going to make to that. Like, while I agree with that 100%, I mean, they just had The Rock on. They just had The Rock on New Year's Evil. So
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
it's different when it's
it's like a
different.
one-time thing versus it
Yeah,
being like the main, obviously the
yeah,
main roster. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
I said, dude, I definitely could see that. I hope that it's not anything that's like detrimental for Corey, to be honest. But
Hmm.
because, like I said, I'm a big fan of what he does. I think I've said for years I think he's really good on commentary. But to your point, if there was a way that he could come back and wrestle, that would be a dope way for that to happen. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
wrestled
that would
in
be the best way to
NXT,
make a splash for sure.
100%. Like, you know, you wrestled in NXT and then they bring you back to NXT and you're kind of pissed about it on commentary. And then, you know,
Yeah,
that's where it happens. Now, I'm not saying that that's where it's going. I don't have any information that says that that's where that's going. I'm just saying I hope so, because the fact that he tweeted that and then wasn't on NXT makes me like shit. I just hope it's not like, you know, it was taken in a real bad light. So
yeah.
we'll see what happens. But we've been flapping our gums for a hot ass minute on this show, because it looks like we are getting close to the next spot for y'all that are watching over here on bodyslam.net and all those things. But before we get out of here, this Thursday, we're going to have the homie Chris from Ruthless Pro Wrestling come through to bring us a little bit more information on Ruthless Pro Wrestling and 7 Wrestling present Hydra. We're going to be talking about that. We'll talk a little bit more about UFC 311 and our thoughts on that. But I also can tell you that we're supposed to be joined by our guy MM3 Malcolm Monroe III will be making an appearance on the show to talk about his match. You heard Masada talk about it with Arrow Boy when he was on. Like I said, man, a lot to talk about, a lot coming through here. We also have the Clarissa Shields fight is coming up, which we should be doing a lot of coverage for that, and have some new faces that will be coming to the show to talk about those fights. And we've got Legends of Combat, the debut show for Legends of Combat. Shout out to Matt Friendo. I will be back on the commentary alongside Cory for that one. You also have February 8th will be out in Cadillac for two-piece promotions. Make sure you check that out. And then February 22nd, Mitten Muay Thai is back at it. I will be back on the commentary for that one. That one will be live here on Millions, so we're going to be talking about that as well. So all kinds of shit coming from your boys at Knockouts and 3 Counts. Still getting everything fixed and taken together at ko3c.com. So if you didn't get to check this out live and check this out, you want to listen to it on a podcast, you want to go get a t-shirt, you want to go do all those things, you can do all of them at ko3c.com. And until next time, in the in-between time, I've flapped my gums enough. I'm ready to stuff my face. With that being said, peace.